politics of VBACs largely centers around a lot of care providers and hospitals not feeling comfortable supporting women through VBACs because the liability risk is too high, even though it has been found through numerous studies that for women that are good candidates for a VBAC is often much, much safer than a repeat C-section. Still, that liability risk is high for doctors and medical institutions. And again, a lot of times they don't want to support VBACs because of that liability risk. And, they prefer a repeat C-section, speaking of liability, because if anything goes wrong, they can say we did everything we could. Because as I've mentioned before in this course, a C-section is the epitome of intervention during labor. So essentially pushing a repeat C-section on a woman helps to guard the doctor and the hospital against malpractice lawsuits. And because OBGYNs are sued more than almost any other group of professionals, it is valid that they want to ensure that they have the proper insurance. So again, if they're looking at those insurance premiums and they're just ridiculously high, if they're going to support VBACs, then it is somewhat understandable why some care providers would say, I would love to support VBACs, but I can't afford that insurance. So it can make it really difficult. In addition, hospitals, care providers, they receive more money for a C-section than for a vaginal birth. And so some, certainly not all, care providers will push for a repeat C-section because of that. But I think the primary reason a lot of care providers are hesitant is because, it is so expensive to have that insurance. That liability risk is so high. And so these are likely many of the contributing factors for the current C-section rate in the United States of 31.9%, even though, and this is really important to note, the World Health Organization recommends that the C-section rate not be above 10 to 15%. So we're at more than double that in the United States because we have such a messy situation with insurance, with liability. It's a mess. As I mentioned in the video about the history of VBACs, these tricky politics surrounding VBACs, it largely started, when VBACs were more commonplace, but what was also commonplace was women trying for VBACs being induced. And so as I mentioned in that video, a lot of induction medications increase the risk for a uterine rupture. So more uterine ruptures were happening during that time for women trying for a VBAC, and that resulted in more uterine ruptures, more lawsuits. And there were, beyond the lawsuits, one of the responses was that the ACOG, the American College of Gynecologists and Obstetricians, they created the guideline that I've mentioned before, that hospitals should not support VBACs unless they have an anesthesiologist on hand 24/7, which many hospitals do not. And so again, many insurance companies that before had really encouraged VBACs, even some saying, we really don't want to support a repeat C-section unless it is absolutely necessary. They kind of flipped the script and they're like, oh, wait, all these women are having uterine ruptures. There's all these lawsuits. This is getting expensive. So they jacked up the malpractice insurance premium for doctors that, supported the VBACs. So this has all led to the age of VBAC hesitancy, which consists essentially of it being really hard for women to find care providers who will support them in a VBAC. And in addition, many states have laws forbidding care providers from attending VBACs in a home or a birth center. It can only occur in a hospital in many areas. And so many women have had to turn to hospitals affiliated with universities to have a VBAC because these institutions, they're they're more often than not pretty up to date on the most recent research about VBACs, which again shows that, as I've mentioned a million times, for women that are good candidates, a VBAC is usually a lot safer than that repeat C-section. So university hospitals, they have this information, they know the risks of repeat C-sections, and they know how they can best support a woman trying for a VBAC. So that's why this type of institution for a lot of women is really the best, one of the best locations to be if you want to have a VBAC. And it's also important to note that many of the politics around VBACs are like really slowly shifting in a good direction. You know, the ACOG, they finally released a new stance on VBACs, saying that they're a safe option for many women. So I consider that a small win, and hopefully we continue in this positive direction.